Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the D-Rate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it.
You know, you, Wilk, and I are part of a crew of folks that understand that renewing our democracy has to start with rebuilding our relationships and our trust and our ability to lower the toxicity of our national conversation and our local conversations. And this crew has grown, and we've gone from maybe a couple dozen organizations 10 years ago focused on bringing people together across lines of conflict to today thousands of these organizations.
Friends, today I am thrilled to bring you a conversation with someone who has spent decades working to bridge divides and bring people together, David Eisner. David's career has spanned the worlds of business, government, and nonprofit leadership. He served as the CEO of the Corporation for National and Community Service under President George W. Bush, led the National Constitution Center, and formerly headed the Convergence Center for Policy Resolution. Throughout his career, David has been deeply committed to fostering dialogue and collaboration to tackle some of our nation's most pressing challenges. In our conversation today, David shares his journey into public service and why he believes that community engagement is essential in solving societal issues. We'll also explore the role that technology plays in polarization. It can connect us, but it can just as easily divide us, and discuss the erosion of trust in institutions as a result. David emphasizes the need for citizens to come together, build relationships, and work towards solutions rather than relying on government alone. We also touch on the unique role of faith leaders, who often find themselves navigating political divides and the importance of their work in fostering dialogue and understanding. Ultimately, this is a conversation about rejecting toxic polarization, rebuilding trust through open communication, and finding hope in the growing movement against divisiveness. Let's dive into it with my friend, David Eisner. Here we go. David Eisner, thank you so much for joining me here on the D-Rate the Hate podcast. And so good to see you.
It's an enormous pleasure. Well, thank you for this, and thank you for all you do in lowering toxic polarization in the country.
Absolutely. David, I first became aware of you at the 2024 Braver Angels convention, and unfortunately we did not get to meet in person because our schedules kind of conflicted there a little bit. But we've got so many common friends, and I've heard so many incredible things about you and the work that you have done over the years. And to have you here on the podcast, joining me to talk about depolarization and the degrading effects of toxic polarization on our communities and on our country is a true honor. So, for
we could spend a little bit of time proving each other's fandom of the other. I really think of it as an honor for me to be on the program. Thanks, Will.
Oh, that's so kind. That is absolutely just so kind of you, David. I look back over the history of the things that you've done, your body of work over the past 3 to 4 decades, and the organizations that you have have done work with and led are amongst some of the ones doing the greatest things for our community. And the fact that you have devoted your life, David, to public service and humanity as a whole is so inspirational. So the first thing I really want to get into with you is, over the years, I mean, you've been the CEO of like Convergence and AmeriCorps, National Constitution Center. You were a cabinet appointee by the Bush administration back in the day. You've done all these incredible things with your life, but what was it, David, that started you on this path? How did you decide so many years ago that this was a thing that you needed to do?
Well, that's a really good question. I have to divide it into two parts. Because I didn't start off thinking that this work was fundamentally public interest work on my part. I spent really most of the first half of my career on both the political side, but a lot more on the business side, thinking about what it takes to grow communities, because I was really in the late 80s and throughout the 90s in the emergence of a new technology-based medium, and knew really for a fact that this medium offered enormous benefits to business and to our communities, but that those could only be realized if we figured out a way to enable more communities to participate in the benefits, like around e-commerce. And so at America Online, I focused on thinking through what it looked like to bring, for example, African American communities onto these internet portals, what it looked like to connect LGBTQ communities together on the internet. And I put a good deal of time thinking about how the internet supported geographic communities and non-geographic communities. As a result of a lot of that work, the Bush administration brought me in to run the Corporation for National and Community Service, AmeriCorps, which was a Senate-confirmed position, and with the goal of community building. But the thing that changed my life was seeing the role that citizens could play in driving solutions that government and business are incapable of, whether that's around policy or culture or simply about finding solutions in their communities, in their states, and in the nation. And as a result, I made a shift. When I came out of government, I went into the nonprofit sector with a focus, as you mentioned, at the National Constitution Center on finding ways to better engage citizens. Most recently working at Convergence, exploring the ways that we could come together across our divisions to develop consensus on really intractable issues like guns, for example, or lowering healthcare costs, other kinds of challenges. So that's a long way to answer. The core of the question is that I started off being motivated by community, and as part of that, then have become really deeply focused on what it means to bring citizens together to solve our common problems.
Right. No, and I want to talk about that in a certain way, because one of the things that I think about today that bothers me so much, being a conservative guy, is so many people today, or so it seems. So many people today, David, are looking for a government or some specific politician to swoop in and solve a lot of their problems. But I am very much a guy of No, it's we the people that have to come together and solve our problems. And like you talked about way back in the day with AOL and stuff like that, it's how do we bring these communities together? But one thing that I think the internet has done has given people this faux sense of community and driven them apart, which I find very, very bothersome, because I absolutely agree communities and us as individuals within our communities working together are going to be what's going to solve our problems. It's not government or some government official or some government entity. So talk a little bit about that, how that dynamic works.
Yeah, well, first of all, I need to say that there's a lot of folks that overbanked on the role of the internet and digital media in bringing us together. And, you know, what I learned is that this idea that technology predicts what will happen is actually wrong. There's no such thing as technological determinism. It's how we use it. Mm-hmm. And clearly we fell behind on the social media. We've fallen behind three uses. One is the media determining how to use social media for profit, politicians figuring out how to use social media for political power, and companies figuring out how to drive media for consumption. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, how to drive social media toward consumption. And all three of those things in social media require the ability to push off against something, to be negative in order to be positive, to focus on the problem, and to raise fear. And so we have these drivers, and I know Amanda Ripley calls them conflict entrepreneurs. I think I heard you calling them, I forgot what you call them. What
outrage entrepreneurs.
Outrage entrepreneurs. Yeah. And but the bottom line is that we have these invested, high stakes actors that are spending a lot more money than any of us on divisiveness. And so the question that you're really asking is there a way through this where citizens can come together and our communities can come together? And I think, Wilk, that we're right at the beginning of seeing a wave form in opposition to being polarized. I think we're hearing frustrated citizens that are despairing and hopeless, beginning to say, in addition to being despairing and hopeless, they're saying, no, I'm not going to tolerate this. And that's the beginning of a wave that I feel like we've been waiting for a long time. My prediction is that wave will form, but won't sort of be recognized over the next 40 days as we run into the election. Probably won't be recognized for the next 3 or 4 months after we come out of the election because of how much investment is going in by the folks sowing divisiveness. But I believe that when we come out the other side, we're going to see that there's been enormous growth of citizen intolerance for this kind of behavior. And we're going to start watching politicians and media respond, but we're also going to see more programs like yours, some of the ones that I'm involved with, getting new momentum, new energy, and new participation as we begin to reverse some of these trends.
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, I love the idea of a waveform, and I certainly wish that it could take shape within the next 40 days. That would be miraculous. That would be nothing short of a miracle. But yeah. Whether I've heard people refer to this large group that's becoming intolerant to the toxicity as the exhausted middle, right? And then my friend Manu Meal, talks about it on his podcast. Manu Meal from Bridge USA talks about the hopeful majority, and that's his podcast. And I love the idea of just the hopefulness in that we're growing weary of all the toxicity. You mentioned I talk about outrage entrepreneurs. That's just part of it, right? I talk about the fog model, David, the fear, the outrage, the grievance that so many, whether it be those folks in the media or the politicians or whatever, people that have used social media to drive divisiveness, use that fog model, and that fog model has been incredibly effective at creating some huge mouthpieces within these like I said, the outrage entrepreneurs, and then I go so far as to call some of them grievance grifters, because they will capitalize on the grievances that some people have. I want to get to a point, David, where and not for just personal reasons, but shows like mine and organizations that you are a part of, that becomes as popular again as what these fog model organizations or these fog model mouthpieces have become, because we cannot let those that are trying to divide us win the day. So the idea of a waveform, now if it's after the election, so be it. I've heard so many people talk about, if this person wins, it's the end of democracy, or if this person wins, the United States is finished. I think that's all ridiculous. It's all pablum. It's hyperbolic nonsense, and it's garbage. I believe in, and we talked a little bit about it in the pre-show. I believe in the divine providence that played a part in creating the United States of America, and I believe that divine providence will take hold again in the event that things get too far sideways. But I want to make it as popular again to bring people together as it has become to tear them apart. So talk a little bit about that.
I love that. I love that vision, Wilk, and I'll affirm. I'll affirm very much this idea that all of our most precious cultural and religious touchstones, including everything that we learned in grade school and Sunday school class, tells us that that we're going the wrong direction. And I would double down on how you think of fear and outrage as the ingredients for this. I'm interested in whether there's a place we might disagree around the grievance piece. My sense is that grievance is different than fear and outrage. Fear and outrage are generally manufactured. Or if they're natural, they require a different kind of understanding and appreciation in order to lower bad behavior. Grievance, in a lot of cases, not always, but in a lot of cases, is a really legitimate expression of ouch. Right?
Oh, sure.
I'm getting hurt by what's happening here, and I'm aggrieved. And I don't think that we should be somehow criticizing people for saying ouch. What we need to understand is that part of our job in lowering toxic polarization is to help everybody feel like they belong, and to help everybody feel like their needs are as important as everybody else's. And unfortunately, we've been in an environment where too many people on all sides, frankly, of all of these issues, feel dislocated, not belonging, alienated by the way things are going, and for good reason, fear that their needs aren't going to be addressed anytime soon.
Right.
So So I tend to sympathize with a lot of the grievances expressed, but believe deeply that there's sometimes a mistake that communities that have grievance must entirely be the authors of their own solutions. And the fact is that all of this work requires all of us. Any of us that want our society to be fair to everybody must take responsibility and accountability for that. And by identifying solutions that not everybody is connected to, we're actually potentially exacerbating our problem as opposed to fixing it. But just in general, Wilk, I think I tend to not want to bundle the idea of grievance with fear and outrage.
Yeah, no, and I can appreciate that, and I think that's a very fair point. Just for clarification, and just so you kind of know where I come from with the fog model and what role the grievance part of that model plays is I would never I guess dissuade anybody from trying to express their grievances. Where I become bothered by that, David, is when certain entities will try to capitalize on the real grievances, and sometimes perceived grievances, but real grievances of a certain community or of a particular person. So it's not that I would say you have no right to feel the way that you feel, and you have no. I will even go so far as to say that with somebody's fear or their outrage. I think each of those three things, fear, outrage, and grievance, all need to be addressed and need to be addressed in a certain way, because I don't have the right to tell any person you don't have the right to be scared, or I don't have the right to tell any person you don't have the right to be outraged, or you don't have any true grounds for grievance in this particular situation. Where I get bothered, David, is when certain people try to capitalize upon a certain group's, like I said, real or perceived grievances, because I think those are two different things. And I think whether they are real or perceived, how one feels about those, the feelings are always going to be very real. How we deal with them and how we help people through them, how we help people navigate those different things is where I start to have a problem, because I think most people can agree, and they can look at whether it be people in the media or people on social media or people within in our political ranks will try to capitalize upon the feelings that people have based on their real or perceived grievances. So that's I just wanted to clarify that. I don't know if that makes you feel any different about what you said, but I don't disagree with I don't disagree with your statement. We can't expect everybody to be the author of their own solution, because I think that I think that's one of the most important things about community is we as a community can help our neighbors, help our brothers, help our sisters, help our community write that solution to their problems. And if those problems, if the core root cause of that particular grievance is something that we as a community can write together, then by all means, that's what we need to do. So hopefully that clears that up.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, Wilk, you and I are in violent agreement, actually, on the substance of this. I do think that it's important to note that when we speak about helping those communities, we're talking about with and not for or to those communities. Sometimes the word help can feel loaded that way.
It can.
And, but I would also say, Wilk, that I'm also conservative.
Okay.
And I feel a real need in how I express things to not allow my language to be easily translated into hostility,
Sure.
especially in areas of grievance.
Sure.
Because there's a deep fear that, a whole bunch of different fears about conservatives. Among others, this idea that right now conservatism is nothing more than fragile white response to the possibility of non-white majority leadership in the United States. That's certainly not where I come from. And I know it's not where you come from. But I worry that when we talk about grievance as one of the drivers of polarization, that we could easily be heard as taking a side
As
on that
dismissing
particular issue. And so I try really hard not to do that.
And that's completely fair. I mean, I think that's a point well taken. I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's transition this a little bit, because there's something that you wrote, David, that really meant a lot to me, and I'll provide just a touch of a backstory on it. One of the biggest things that I've been working on over the past couple of years is something that we're calling at Braver Angels the Truth and Trust Project, and that is, for anybody who might just be listening to the DTH podcast for the first time, that Truth and Trust Project is between me and Dr. Francis Collins, trying to figure out how we reestablish trust between we the people and the public health establishment in this country, because that relationship was damaged immensely by the government's response to the pandemic and whatever. So one of the things that you wrote, and this meant a lot to me when I read it, David, was polarization is degrading Americans' trust in institutions and each other, jeopardizing civil society, driving political gridlock, and creating risk and complexity for public and private institutions' relationships with their stakeholders. So talk a little bit about what that means to you. I mean, our friend John Wood Jr. talks about polarization being the one problem that ensures all other problems won't be solved. But that polarization definitely has played a huge part in the degradation of trust between we the people and our institutions. Talk a little bit about that for me, would you, David?
Sure. And first of all, I need to start by I'm such a fan of Braver Angels. You mentioned that I'm a fan of huge amount of what they've done, and seeing how much success they've had since 17 and 18 is pretty remarkable. There's a really important saying that community objectives are solved at the speed of relationships. Where community problems are solved, community objectives are reached at the speed of relationships. And we seem to be in a moment where we have these expectations that we can engage in politics, we can fix problems, we can build culture, and not worry about our relationships with each other. And the fact is that doesn't work. No. And it's really obvious and evident when we look at issues like immigration or abortion. It's a little bit less obvious when we think about corporations. But when you look at what's happening in most large companies right now, you're seeing that as companies make corporate decisions, they're getting whipsawed by different groups that may have different beliefs or may want to be more included or feel like the organization is putting too much attention to politics, or that believe that the organization is putting too little attention to politics. There are stakeholders that are being mobilized by activists, whether it's around climate or it's about budget issues or about trade. And increasingly, what's happening is companies are having problems with everything every important decision they make and every position that they take. Stakeholders are attacking it. But the answer is the same. This is about creating better relationships and smarter ways of working together as community. So if these companies found ways to actually involve their stakeholders in the discussion on the front end and to feel like they're doing the kinds of communicating and connecting that Braver Angels, for example, is building in different political and civic instances, those corporations would also be have far healthier internal cultures, and they would be able to move more quickly, and they'd have more flexibility. So my sense is that at its root, this is about having relationships of trust. And trust doesn't mean that people are going to do exactly what we want them to do. Trust means that we believe that they're operating consistently with their own values, which we respect, even if we don't agree with.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think now, for the record, you and I have both said that we're conservative, and to my way of thinking, that for the longest time, the conservative movement would have nothing to do with boycotts and trying to shut down the dissenting. And I don't think that there's a large portion of that side that's trying to shut down dissenting speech. But I do think we've entered a realm, David, where we are seeing more often where because of people's anger, misguided anger, and fear or just outrage over certain issues, people are trying to, encourage boycotts of a certain company because that company is going. Let's go with a word that I don't like, but it's used all the time now: woke, or something like that. And I think that you, as somebody who's been in business, has led very large companies. The values of the board and doing what is right for the company may not always be the right thing for every individual, and that's one of the things that I think of when I think of companies is I would just assume, companies and corporations stay out of politics, stay out of policy, and don't even, not that I would ever say that you cannot make your voice heard on a particular issue, but I just don't think, as somebody who's worked for very large corporations, I don't think it is good business for companies to dip their toe into the political waters, so to speak, and do that, because I think those companies end up losing credibility with their stakeholders, and especially stakeholders that when I think of stakeholders, I don't only think of the people that own stock in the company, but people who depend on those companies and things like that. And it just gets too muddy. It gets too ugly. I would love it if certain organizations just kept their voice out of it and left it to the individuals, and then the individuals can do what they do, keep their business separate from their politics. That's just my opinion on the thing.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I guess I partially agree that businesses should have a really clear understanding in whatever they're engaged in, what business outcome they're looking for, rather than be focused on trying to accomplish political outcomes. But, and it's a huge but, there actually are a lot of critical business outcomes that can only be accomplished through policy. Whether we're talking about the regulatory framework, government will always structurally lean toward more regulations. It's businesses. Business is the only stakeholder that's able to articulate how regulations reduce productivity, right? Businesses are the only way to have a meaningful discussion about what is and isn't proportionally useful to do around climate. Businesses are critical to a lot of issues, whether it's defense manufacturing or it's trade or dealing with budget surplus or interest rates. These are all areas of government control where business would make a deep strategic error not to see those deeply connected to the benefits of their business and their shareholders. So
Yeah, that makes a lot
I
of sense.
think it's challenging, and I guess the way that I would say, I wouldn't do a sweeping statement about, except that business should be involved where the business interests are. And to the extent that there are business interests in policy and politics, it kind of sucks because they can Bigfoot folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's hard to tell them not to engage. And where the businesses are just pursuing leaders' personal political beliefs and not the business interests, they should look at that again, because that's not the way businesses best succeed.
No, that's right. And yeah, it's not the it is not fair to those people that hold interest within that company.
I would also say, I focused in on business, but I've also heard you and read on your site that you lead from your perspective of Christian roots, and this entire space is now also really critical in the faith-based community. We're seeing more evangelical pastors saying that they want to leave their positions than we've ever seen before. And that threat is 100% connected to pastors feeling like, to many pastors feeling like their congregations are overly politically involved, and that as their religious leaders, the pastors don't know how to bring them back to connecting with their core values over their political beliefs. And there's a lot of pathways to understand there also how to reimagine the relationships between the pastors and their congregations so that these areas are managed by effective dialogue rather than by unremarked conflict.
Yeah, no, and I think the idea that we have so many pastors and religious leaders that are stepping away from their congregations because of that. I've heard of those as well. I've talked to some, and that is a very scary proposition because if people start to lose faith in their faith-based communities, and we've been seeing a decline in it for quite a long time, and to me, as somebody who is a professed Christian, not one that is part of a constant religious practice of going to church or whatever, but the idea that so many people are walking away from faith is I think very, very troublesome for the future of our country, for the future of humanity. That's me personally. I believe that. But the idea that we have so many of our faith leaders that are losing their ability to have that dialogue with their congregations, as you said, I believe that that one of the biggest problems we have leading to toxic polarization is the lack of dialogue, the lack of people's ability to talk about uncomfortable subjects with people, whether it be for fear that they're going to alienate that person for one reason or another, or whatever. But our faith leaders are supposed to be the ones that are able to do that. They are
exactly
supposed to be,
the prophetic. The tradition of prophetic voice is not one of always being in agreement.
Exactly. I mean, the whole idea behind faith is being able to instill within somebody something that you cannot tangibly prove. And if you're unwilling to have a conversation with somebody in your congregation about a contentious topic without worrying about alienating them for some reason, then you probably shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. I mean, I hate to say it. Maybe you would have been a better congregant than person leading the congregation, and that might be unpopular to say for some. But the reality is, David, you and I both know that the best way to fix most of these problems, this toxic polarization, the tears in the fabric of our nation, is to incentivize, or not incentivize, but maybe incentivize, but really show people what the incentive is in having those tough conversations. It bothers me so much, the idea that so many of our faith leaders just find themselves incapable of bringing their flock back, and I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that the powers that be that use the ideas of outrage and fear have started to overcome people's ability to see through the fog. People's ability to get beyond. Like I said, I don't know if it was with you in our pre-conversation today, or a conversation I had earlier today, but I've had this conversation with so many. I think it was probably maybe even in this episode, but I believe there's a certain amount of divine providence that has played a huge part in the formation and how our nation has been sustained. If we as Christians, or we as people of faith, whatever faith, if we as people of faith give power to the power of man as opposed to the power of, in my case, Christ, to really fix what humans have kind of gone wrong, or where they've gone astray, and no longer have the faith that there will be divine providence. I think that's a very troublesome place to get to.
It is. I don't know if you've seen, Wilk, there's a great program that's been developing for a couple years called Matthew 5:9. The Matthew 5:9 is the statement, I believe, blessed are the peacemakers. But there's a way that they have, and Matthew 5:9 is a creation of One America movement, which is a terrific organization that I'm on the board of. But Matthew 5:9 basically says that there's three elements from a Christian perspective to help leaders and pastors move past this challenge. The first is the idea of creating resources and training to really help leaders understand the best practices and evidence that support how people can come together to move past conflict. The second element is about relationship, that we need to find ways for these leaders, these pastors, to be in community with each other. as a way of each of them feeling supported as they engage in their sometimes more lonely work of dealing with conflict inside their congregations. And then there's this idea of renewal, of helping Christian leaders approach this from their core value, that these issues of conflict and tribalism are the work that Christ worked through on the cross, and that there's a Christian belief that people can only resolve conflict and be peacemakers because God resolved his conflict with us, right? And just to be clear, I'm Jewish. This isn't my tradition, but it's a really important way to be engaging people, and it points out the larger theme that we need to be in conversation with people where they feel at the core of their values, rather than just speaking to them transactionally.
No, absolutely. So Matthew 5:9 project is something I'm definitely going to look more into, David, because I think that's incredibly important. I think that our faith leaders, whether it be faith leaders on the within the Jewish community or the Christian community or any other community, for the longest time they were our teachers. They were the people that we went to with our biggest problems, and I think the problems that we all have as individuals have become far more exacerbated since people started walking away from their respective faiths, and then I think giving our faith leaders the tools to try and rebuild and work through some of these conflicts is incredibly important. So that's definitely an organization that I'm going to look into more. David, this conversation we're kind of nearing the end of our time. I knew we were going to get there because there's so much that we could talk about. I think there's so much room for collaboration between us in the future. You're doing incredible work. You've been doing incredible work for so long, and again, I'll just go back to what I said earlier. It's an honor to have you here. And do you have any parting words for the DTH listeners for now? Because this is definitely not the last time you're going to be here.
I just want to leave with a sense of hope. You, Wilk, and I are part of a crew of folks that understand that renewing our democracy has to start with rebuilding our relationships and our trust and our ability to lower the toxicity of our national conversation and our local conversations. And this crew has grown. And we've gone from maybe a couple dozen organizations 10 years ago focused on bringing people together across lines of conflict to today thousands of these organizations. Now, so we're beginning to see this need, the capacity to meeting the need is growing, and more businesses and schools and universities and places of worship where people are beginning to adopt approaches of bringing people together across conflict. And so I really believe that even though it's going to feel like things are getting darker and darker for maybe the next 5 months, that underneath that, there's a renewal sprouting. And probably right around the springtime, we're going to start seeing some really powerful shoots of this work begin to break through the ground.
That's a beautiful, beautiful message to leave our conversation on for now, David. A message of hope. I love the idea that we are going to reach the capacity to meet these needs. And thank you so much for your time. David Eisner, you're a blessing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.